Bruce Friedman of Adult Site Broker, and welcome to Adult Site Broker Talk, where each week we interview one of the movers and shakers of the adult industry, and we give you a tip on buying and selling websites. This week we'll be speaking with free speech attorney Jeffrey Douglas in part 2 of our interview. We've doubled our affiliate payouts at ASB Cash. Now, when you refer sellers or buyers to us, you'll receive 20% of our broker commission on any and all sales that result from that referral for life. Check out asbcash.com for more details and to sign up. And we're proud to announce our latest project, thewaronporn.com. You'll find articles from industry websites as well as mainstream publications. It's designed to raise awareness of our industry's plight in the war on porn and the numerous attacks on our industry. You'll find all that and more at thewaronporn.com. Now time for our property of the week that's for sale at Adult Site Broker. We're proud to offer a premium cam site launched in 2010. It was designed and developed for models by models. Many of their current hosts have been with them for over a decade due to high traffic, high payouts, tons of earning options, a robust model interface, and more. The site has safety features like the ability to block and report customers, geo-blocking, and geo-hiding. The owner started an adult as a doorman at the Men's Club of Charlotte. As an entrepreneur with little coding experience, he built their prototype site. Once the first dancer from the club made some money, more followed and the site took off. Their database has over 127,000 registered users and over 1,100 registered models. Potential buyers with access to models, dancers, or creators can onboard their current talent and increase sales quickly. White label owners can instantly double profits by switching to their own platform. Also, investing in recruiting and hiring hosts or onboarding new talent pays off instantly. If a host is added today, it is reflected in revenue immediately. Only $926,000. Here's part 2 of my interview with free speech attorney Jeffrey Douglas. We don't hear much about 2257 anymore. You were instrumental in making 2257 regulations less restrictive, and thank you for that. I don't think you probably get enough thank yous for that. What should website owners know about 2257 today and how it relates to content valuation?
That is the exact right focus. So 2257 has never been enforced against the adult industry. The only 2257 cases that have been brought, with 2 minor exceptions, have been of actual child pornographers where they have a spouse. So here's the sort of typical 2257 case. Husband and wife install cameras so that they can observe their nieces and nephews undress in the shower. So they're creating child pornography. So that carries 15 years mandatory minimum. So the husband agrees to plead to the 15 years or up mandatory minimum, and they allow the wife to plead for a plea bargain, and the plea bargain is 2257. So she does 3 months, 6 months, whatever. The husband bites the bullet and gets the 15 to 30 years. And that's how 2257 has been used. So what 2257 represents, and the only even first step of enforcement was 20 years ago, when under enormous pressure from Congress, the FBI finally did something and they executed 30 inspections around the country. Despite the press releases from the companies that were being searched, which said, we did perfectly, and that when the FBI agents were leaving, they said, there's never been a better site than, business than yours. I was representing many of those companies, and there were substantial violations. Not of the merits. It wasn't that there were actually people underage, but they didn't have the IDs. They didn't have them in the right places. And 2057, in reality, is not about preventing minors. It's to create a whole bunch of arbitrary rules to trap the unwary.
Of course. We knew, just like age verification, they were just trying to make it harder for us to do business. That was the whole reason for it.
And I'll do another little sidelight. There's never been a hearing in Congress on 2257. Not one. There's never been a witness called. It was added into the law in a omnibus crime bill in 1980 something or other. And they never held a hearing on it, but in conference, you can get anything into an omnibus bill. And in all of the amendments that have happened to it since, it's the exact same way. So 2257 is the misbegotten child of just a handful of right-wing legislators. They require the FBI to enforce it, and the FBI doesn't want to. So on the enforcement end, with the exception of that brief period where everyone was scared shitless, but nothing came of it, that breeds contempt. You know, if a law isn't enforced, you stop paying attention to it. But there is a reason that it's in the economic interest of every website to be extremely diligent of the 2257 records, because someday you're going to put your business up for sale. I know that's what I
know. That's what I do.
And your audience certainly wouldn't understand that, right? Okay, so
Nope.
If I'm selling a website and content, the first thing a sophisticated buyer does is says, I want to see your 2257 records. Because if the 2257 records aren't perfect, and I mean perfect, the price goes down because it's a leverage point. So I've been involved in both the sale of extremely large entities and also very large entities getting very large loans. And in both cases, I was hired to do a 2257 survey by either the lenders or the buyer. And while I was chosen because of my absolute neutrality, what they were hoping was that I would report failures of the 2257 record keeping system because the price would go down.
Right. Justify the legal fee.
Exactly. So it was remarkable how vital the 2257 records played in the sales. I've also been involved in small sales. You know, a company, this is pre-internet, a company had a pretty large library. The principal dies. The survivors don't want to have anything to do with it. They want to sell it. And the selling entity says, yeah, we got our 2257 records are perfect and all of that. And it turns out they were terrible. And so it wasn't a matter of leverage. The reality was their library, half, 2/3, couldn't be sold. It was worthless because no one would take the risk of putting. Yeah, so be very diligent because it adds value to your product. And of course, there's the reality that there are stupid, greedy, short-sighted people out there who have cameras. I have known people who've been in the business 30 years who did photo shoots without getting the ID first, and then afterwards had an, oh, shit. So getting 2257 records just, allows you to sleep better at night. And the better they're kept, the better off you are. We won a legislative battle, which kind of gutted 2257 because it eliminated these administrative searches. So they can no longer just knock on your door and saying, hi, I'm a friendly FBI agent, I want to see your 2257 records. They either have to get a search warrant or a subpoena, which requires an actual probable cause. You have to have a reason to think that there's a 2257 violation, not just be in business. So the courts so ruled. The government did not appeal to the Supreme Court, so that is the law of the land. The regulations, half of the regulations pertain to administrative searches. So they're all no longer constitutional, including the requirement to put your address out. Because if they can't do an administrative search, why are you required to disclose your address? Now, we're fighting to get those regs rewritten to conform with the Court of Appeal opinion. And in our proposal, we rewrote 2257 to make it a friend of the industry. Nothing in the current regulations has anything to do with the privacy of the performers. And 2257 records is an identity theft in a can, right? So in the proposed regulations we have, there's a lot of emphasis on what record keepers pass on and disclose. So if you're the person that did the original recording and got the original copies of the passport and whatever, and their birth date, their legal name, and every name they've ever used their entire life, all that kind of stuff. If you sell the product and you transfer the 2257 records, you remove the personal identifying information. So you only give the birth year or birth date. Sometimes you have to give the full birth date, but you only use the last 4 digits of the passport and you delete the name. So there are dozens and dozens of elements of that. So if we're able to persuade the Justice Department, and it's realistic that there will be changes. Not that we're going to get everything we want, but we'll convert 2257 from being a series of mindless landmines, pointless ways to find a new way to go to prison. Failing to alphabetize properly is a felony under 2257. We've eliminated all of that bullshit and instead put in a core that deters minors from getting in, but benefits the industry in a variety of different ways. For instance, and this is a super important one for all of your listeners, right now credit card companies can demand 2257 records.
I was just going to say that because I got a client right now mentioning that.
Yeah. And so a bunch of entities that have no legal right to get them under the law are demanding them. And under the new regulations, that would be impossible because the entity that they would ask would say it's against the law for me to turn it over to you. As
it absolutely should be. So at XBiz LA in January, which was an outstanding show, by the way, FSC had a wonderful day of seminars, and much of it dealt with banking discrimination and the FSC's lobbying efforts in D.C. I'm sure pretty much everyone listening to this has experienced banking discrimination at some point or another. I know I certainly have. How are our industry's lobbying efforts going against this type of discrimination?
A number of fortunate things all came into place at the same time. In the past, Washington, D.C. lobbying has been beyond our financial capacity and our resources. We had a fantastic lobbyist who was just very sympathetic to us, who helped us out, but we never had, a sort of full force, full court press lobbying. Just didn't have the resources. When Wells Fargo started purging 2 years ago, and it got onto social media, a lobbyist for a financial lobbying firm that represents the cannabis industry and everybody else, they reached out to us and said, we want to represent you pro bono. So we got incredible lobbying for a year, and we were able to show the value of it. So we were able to raise the money to be able to hire them at a very discounted price because they love us, oddly.
Nice. Somebody loves us.
Yeah. So we keep hearing that we are their favorite client. And the lobbyist who reached out to us, who's not one of the partners, he's just one of the actual, knock-on-door lobbyists. For the last 2 years, he was elected Lobbyist of the Year by his peers.
Wow. I met him at the show. He's fantastic.
He really is. And when you walk on the streets of the Capitol next to him, it's like walking through a fan show arm in arm with a porn star. You can't go 5 feet without somebody walking up and hugging them. Everywhere you go, our lobbyists, someone runs out and says, "Oh, Pierre," and throws their arms around them.
You like somebody like that. As long as they aren't politicians. Well, I guess politicians, we want them to like them, right?
Yeah. So our message is outstanding. It's very well tailored. Our lobbyists are outstanding. And by this other delightful coincidence, conservatives are concerned about banking discrimination because gun stores, extraction industries, coal, oil, whatever, are being boycotted by some banking groups. Now, the reality is, if, and I'm picking this bank out of the blue sky, if, whatever it's called, United California Bank, if some California bank says we're no longer going to loan money to an oil industry, it's not like that actually inhibits the oil industry from getting loans. There are plenty of other entities, right? But it pisses off the right. So they have been drafting laws that say you can't discriminate, you can't engage in banking discrimination when the activity is lawful. When we come to them and say, yeah, you're right, look what's happening to us. And one of the, we carefully pick the people that we bring to talk, and we find the best stories. So we brought in a woman who's second career adult. She's lost 22 forms of accounts, Venmo, all of the new financial services, and then every bank you can think of. So despite the fact that she had a great credit rating and many times the income of her then husband, she wanted to have a house built on land that she owned, but she couldn't get the loan. So her husband got the loan at much higher interest rates because his credit rating was crap, or at least not anywhere as good as hers. And when they got divorced, he claimed the house. So if you're trying to deter essentially pimping, the best possible way to encourage pimping is to deny access to banking. If I'm dependent on someone else for banking, I'm dependent on them for life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything, right? So this is a very compelling story. And even though they don't like the fact that her second career choice was being a fetish model on the internet, it's a pretty compelling story. So there's this tricky balance of trying to find a middle ground between satisfying the conservatives and satisfying the liberals who do want a bank to be able to make a political choice. But everybody seems to agree that if you deny an individual a bank account, it can't be on reputational risk alone. It has to be because they've actually done something wrong. And so we're inching our way towards consensus. And when it happens, we won't be at the center of it. It's going to be when, Maxine Waters, liberal Democrat from Los Angeles, and J.D. Vance, once and forever senator and not any other job, in Ohio, can find a way to, cross that bridge.
I wish I believed that on the day that Trump nominated him for vice president.
That's a core show. But anyway, so we're seeing real progress. And the thing that is most notable to everyone, including our lobbyists, is how well we are received in every office. And we have been in the offices of extreme conservatives who have made hostility towards commercialized sex a centerpiece. And when we go into their office, we're not talking to them, we're talking to their aide, but we're talking to their most senior aide, and they're listening to us and they're engaging in dialogue with us. It's really quite inspiring about how the political process can work even when Congress itself is so profoundly dysfunctional.
Oh, God. You said a mouthful. You chair the FSC's board of directors. Please talk about the importance of the organization, where it's been, and where you see it going.
Okay, great. And we'll do a little crossover from banking discrimination to that. One of the ways that we are addressing the center and the heart of banking discrimination is it is our goal to create our own credit union. Now, to get a chartered bank is impossible. I mean, it's not just hard, it's just forget about it. But a credit union is different, and there was a shift in the rules 2 years ago, that makes it much faster and easier to create a credit union. It's very difficult, but if you go to freespeechcoalition.com there is a survey about what your financial services needs are and which we are using in order to begin the process of getting our charter for credit unions. There are a number of obstacles. A lot of money has to be raised. That's not investment. That's an actual gift in order to pay for the staff, to build up the credit union, to have it ready to roll. But the benefits that will flow to the industry if a credit union comes are just profound. Our industry now is composed of hundreds of thousands of individual creator producers who are going on to fan sites, cam sites. Although those people, most of them had no contact with the adult industry, they are now part of it. And we're their advocates. So, if you're a teacher and you're supplementing your shitty income by OnlyFans and you lose everything, all banking because of that, that's a catastrophe. That those kinds of people will know that they can go to their industry's credit union and be treated as an honored citizen. And that is an example of what the Free Speech Coalition exists for. If not unique, extremely unusual in that our advocacy is not for management or for labor. It's for the entire industry.
Absolutely.
And so the National Rifle Association exists for gun manufacturers and gun sellers. It, in fact, does not care about the individual gun user. So this is, like I said, if not unique, very, very unusual. And there's a sort of purity to what it is we do because of that. There have been many predecessors. The organization was formed in 91. I joined the board in 94, 95. But before that, there was the Adult Video Association, the Adult Motion Picture Association, and on and on and on. All of them formed in a crisis. And as soon as the crisis was resolved, the interest in maintaining the organization died. And so there was about a 3-year half-life for these organizations. And that was what the Free Speech Coalition was destined to be as well. It was formed because of Operation Woodworm, which was a federal assault on manufacturers of videos. It would have put the industry out of business. And the Free Speech Coalition was formed to basically be an alternative voice. And then when the Operation Woodworm was resolved reasonably favorably for the adult industry, interest in the organization flagged and it nearly died. But we got a new board in, including me, that instead of lurching from crisis to crisis, wanted to be a trade association to improve the quality of life for everybody. Businesses, owners, warehouse workers. And that's been our mission ever since. One of the hallmarks was litigation last. Litigation is a last resort because litigation just consumes too much money, too much energy. And so we've had, a number of successes in lobbying. We've had exceptional success in, providing training and education, improving quality of life on that level. And then, when push comes to shove, as it has, and is currently, we engage in litigation. In 99, 98, in the same way that I described 2257 being created, Congress, in a spending bill, a must-pass bill, in conference, Orrin Hatch redefined the child pornography law to eliminate both the children and the pornography. It said that if an image appeared to be that of a minor appearing to have sex, that was child pornography. And if there was no minor involved, if it was an adult portraying a minor, and they weren't actually having sex, but the blanket was moving up and down, that was child pornography. That could not stand. The industry would have been anybody could have been prosecuted for anything because that she looks young to me. No one was willing to sue in the past. Various other groups stood in for us, for the industry, American Library Association, booksellers, periodical dealers. No one wanted to touch it. It was radioactive. So we ended up filing suit, lost to the trial court level. We won in the Ninth Circuit. Supreme Court took it up. Everybody told us that, we were doomed to lose and we were harming the reputation of the industry because it appeared to be we were supporting child pornography, all bullshit. And then, we won. Every one of those, my peers that criticized it, didn't remember ever criticizing it before. And it was, one of the most important First Amendment opinions in a 20-year period. And it was the first time that the adult industry had won on content, not on procedure, in 40 years. So that established the credibility of the organization with other entities that we couldn't have had before. And then contemporaneously with that, we co-sponsored the World Pornography Conference, where we brought in academics from all over the world. It was the Cal State University Northridge has a human sexuality program. They sponsored it. They did a major conference every few years on a variety of different subjects. That year they decided pornography. They reached out to us to be the co-sponsor. And we brought in lawyers, actors, producers, and academics all together. And that was at a point where the academic study of porn was brand new and was exploding. So now there are 2 different porn studies journals and a substantial number of major universities all across North America and Europe now porn study classes. And while I wouldn't characterize Free Speech Coalition as a major force in that, we were a minor force in that. So when we filed our first Supreme Court case, we had one staff person who answered the phone, sent out the bills, and was, the initial contact. Everything else was volunteer. We now have a staff of, I think, 6. So we're still a microscopic organization compared to the groups that you regularly see before the Supreme Court, like, the A.C.L.U. or Electronic Frontier Foundation and these other First Amendment sort of related groups. We're a drop in a bucket compared to them. So the fact that we will have had 2 cases before the Supreme Court is just extraordinary. And the fact that over the next year, it'll be 30 years that I'll be on the board and all volunteer. And, in that time, we have become what I always wished we would become. We have an executive director who's one of the most inspiring people I've ever worked with, Allison Bowden. And we've always hoped that we would have an executive director come from the heart of the industry, as she does. She's inspired our staff. She's inspired new members. She's inspired donors to give us more. And of course, when you give us the resources, we produce. And we give tangible benefits, the most dramatic, of course, being in last few years, the gutting of 2057, the lobbying effort, and the adults verification litigation. We are very obviously changing the lives, improving the lives, protecting the lives of the people in the industry. And, when COVID struck, when Mpox broke out, everybody turned to us, and we would have these online seminars giving the best practices. 90% of the participants were not members.
Mm-hmm. Everyone needs to be a member. It's crazy.
Yeah, but, if we were to get 10%, we would probably, be triple the size we are now. I would be surprised if 5% of the industry is a member.
That's really sad. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank Allison. I want to thank Mike Stubile and all the other attorneys that work pro bono like yourself for everything you do for the industry with FSC, because without you, I don't even want to think where we would be.
It would be a very different world. That is for sure.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about how you got involved in the adult industry and what's kept you engaged with it for so long.
The short story version of it is that I was born to be a criminal defense attorney. In my junior high school yearbook, it says I'm going to be a criminal defense attorney. I had no idea what it was. I saw Henry Fonda play Clarence Darrow in a one-man show and was very inspired by that. I loved representing the underdog. So I went through college and law school with blinders on, criminal defense. Got a job with one of the great lawyers of the generation in Southern California, criminal defense attorney. And he had a partner who represented the adult industry. He retired shortly after I got a job there. And my boss, my inspiring criminal defense attorney boss, didn't want to lose the money and said, okay, now you're the lawyer. I went in with no training, and most of the clients fled. They didn't want to be represented by some, hippie kid lawyer. But a few of them stuck with me, and many of those that did, not all certainly, but a few of the ones who did ended up becoming, big leaders in the industry, and they sort of brought me along with. Because criminal defense is a very wearing business, it abrades, because everybody who is your client has had something very bad happen to them. Sometimes they've done the very bad thing. Sometimes they've been in the wrong place at the wrong time. As I said, in a different context, you can't really win a criminal case. It's just you're cutting losses. It has a tendency to wear you down. And when you affect change, it's typically one person at a time. Occasionally, I'll get a case that goes up to the Court of Appeal, but it's going to be a very narrow issue that, focuses on 1 in 100 search warrants or something like that. So the attraction of working for the adult industry, especially the trade association, is that I get to affect change on a much broader scale. And rather than affecting one life at a time, affecting hundreds, thousands, on occasion, hundreds of thousands. And I'm working with incredibly creative, talented, committed people, because the folks that end up on the Free Speech Coalition board have leadership in their DNA. They care enough that they're willing to, sacrifice time and energy, fulfill the mission to make lives better. It helps, keep the inspiration going. Although we are a more than off center, right? The adult industry is at the far out corner. In many ways, there's nothing more important or rewarding than protecting the most vulnerable. So that's why I've done it. I stopped for a long time. A significant part of my income was advising people on risk. And now the 2057 is, no one is terrified of that. People learn 2057 in the worst possible way by talking to their competitors who often lie to them about what the best way to go and stuff. But so the adult industry has generated very little money for me for probably a decade. But at the same time, as the organization has blossomed and these great people are involved, it's all the more fulfilling. And the current board and the current staff, it's just a pure pleasure to work with them and see their commitment and see the benefits that they're bringing. And the fact that the audience, like I said, 90% don't join and don't sort of pay attention to what we're doing for them, it doesn't detract from the fact that we know that we're doing good. And so doing good is its own reward.
We just need to get more people on board. That's the reason for these podcasts, and I've done many focusing on FSC.
Yeah, I've seen or heard the interviews with Allison, with Mike Stabile. That's I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for listening. Last question. Many people say the war on porn is the worst it's ever been. As a veteran of the legal wars, do you think that's true, or is it just different?
I guess the answer is yes and no. When liberty was at risk, 30 companies were indicted in 1987 in an attack on the mail order business post-porn, and then another 30 companies in 91, 92 in Woodworm. And in post-porn, all but 2 of the companies, the principals went to prison and the companies were put out of business. Adam and Eve was one survivor, and then there was a little tiny Santa Monica company that survived. But every other mail order company went under. and the principals went to prison. And in Woodworm, I think only two sets of people, two companies had a result of their principals going to prison. But that's different. Loss of that kind of liberty, and in some cases, in some states, if you were federally convicted, that will cause you to be a registered sex offender for life. That's a different kind of risk. Now, the reason that the current battle, the yes of the yes and no, what's so disturbing about the current war or battle is what we discussed earlier, the linkage between the extreme form of Christian nationalism that uses anti-porn as a plank in their platform being so integrated with the Republican Party. And they, just like we have learned and become more sophisticated over the decades, so have our opponents. And this is unquestionably the most successful foray against adult that has previously occurred. So that's very frightening. As I said, there are reasons for optimism, but what's, inherently discouraging is that any one of 3 or 4 anti-porn organizations raises and spends more money in a year than the Free Speech Coalition for a decade. That's disturbing and frightening. And the attack, as I said at the very beginning, is on the economic model that we are most familiar with. Even though when search warrants are being executed on 30 businesses on the same day, all of those businesses that didn't have search warrants executed on, they were living in complete panic. The difference now is that the economic model is you can't see the future in that, and that's terrifying. And to the extent they're even partially successful, many, many people will lose their jobs and their livelihoods for no good reason. And everyone needs to know I am an eternal optimist, right? I don't see a glass a quarter full, I see it half full, right? So, but the industry will survive because what we make people like more than almost anything else. And we are serving a fundamental need. Sexuality is this, universally powerful force through all of recorded literature and art. We are giving people what they need. So, yeah.
Well, all I can say, Jeffrey, is just keep fighting the good fight. And I think I speak for everyone when I say we're behind you. And for those of you who aren't already at least members of Free Speech Coalition, join. And if you have a business, sponsor.
We'll accept any penny that you give. We will work with you to make it as easy and effective as possible at whatever level that you're comfortable with, and we will be very grateful for your support. And I might note that the raw numbers matter, right? If 3,000 CAM performers were to join us when we go to Washington and we show where our members are in their district, that's incredibly powerful. So not just dollars, but numbers are extremely important.
That's a language they understand. Votes. Jeffrey, I'd like to thank you for being our guest today on Adult Site Broker Talk, and I hope we'll get a chance to do this again soon.
I look forward to that. I really do. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
As do I.
My broker tip today is part 8 of what to do to make your site more valuable for when you decide to sell it later. Last week, we talked about information needed to give the buyer and being transparent with the buyer. Here's more information on what to give to a potential buyer. How well has your content been protected from piracy, and what steps have you taken to protect your content? Are you using a piracy takedown or monitoring service? These are important things to know. What promotional tools do you offer to your affiliates? The more tools you offer, the more successful your affiliates will be. What is your traffic breakdown by country? Tier 1 countries like the USA, Canada, the UK, Germany, and Australia are the most preferred. Add in anything else that will add value to the sale of your property that you can think of, such as what custom scripts do you use? What content management system software is on your site? Do you use billing or affiliate software like Nats? What's your retention rate? How you retain your members is of the utmost importance. How many joins and rebuilds do you have a day? Do you buy advertising? And if so, what kind? Can your content make more money on the DVD or VOD markets, or have you already tapped into those opportunities? How much did you spend to produce or buy the content that's on your site? What do you believe the content is worth now? We'll talk about this subject more next week. And next week, we'll be speaking with Goddess Reverie of Viral Play Space. And that's it for this week's Adult Side Broker Talk. I'd once again like to thank my guest, Jeffrey Douglas. Talk to you again next week on Adult Side Broker Talk. I'm Bruce Friedman.